What's up, YouTube? Andy from the Sports Card Flip Game, here with the latest on how to get you plugged in to all things sports cards. In today's video, we are going to be talking about the top 3 perils or pitfalls you need to avoid when sports return when you're thinking about buying or selling sports cards. If you haven't already yet, go ahead and hit the sub button and join the team. Would love to have you join us. We've got almost 500 subscribers, so be sure to turn on the bell notification as well so you can be notified when I'm posting new content. I'm really on my grind right now, trying to give you guys something new, something different, something that's not out there where it's just like, buy this guy, buy that guy. So really appreciate everybody's support. Leave me a comment down below. Tell me if you like the content. Tell me what you want to see me feature in a new video. I really do take those seriously. I am trying to incorporate that into new videos and upcoming content so we can help keep you all informed on all the latest and really help you grow your sports card investment, collection, flipping, whatever it may be. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. Really, I think there are 3 pitfalls you all need to avoid when sports return here in just a few weeks at the end of July. First off, I think it's amazing. I'm super stoked. I can't wait. It needs to get here tomorrow. So the idea being sports are going to look a little bit different, right? Baseball is going to be on a 60-game schedule. Basketball is really only going to have like 8 games and then playoffs. So the look and feel of how the games are composed and what it's like from game to game is really going to be a lot differ. It's going to differ a lot because that sort of ebb and flow of buying and selling sports cards is also going to look drastically different. The first pitfall I think you all need to avoid, and one of the things that I'm really critical or thinking a lot about, the first piece is the hyper volatility of prices. And what I mean by that is, let's say you guys know I'm into Luka cards, have a lot of position in Luka. Let's say he goes off and has 40 points in a game. His sports card prices are gonna then just skyrocket. Conversely, let's say he has a game where he only goes off for 16 points or the Mavericks lose, right? His cards are going to take a dip. And it's not like it's going to be week over week, sort of how we've known things to be in a pre-pandemic market. This season, and especially this shortened season, is really going to be hyper ups and downs. And I think we're going to have to keep that in mind when we're looking at players to invest in and our strategies, whether they be short-term flips, medium-term holds or long-term holds. And I think one of the things that you all have to be aware of and really guard against is the hype train. So what I mean by that is a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, well, Kawhi's coming back. Let's all go buy Kawhi cards, right? Only go buy Kawhi cards if, one, you're a believer in Kawhi's game, and I do believe in his long-term potential from a sports card investment. I actually was in a break and got a Court Kings. This is just the base version of Court Kings, but again, right, a good card. I love having that even though he's in his he's in his Raptors uniform, but nonetheless, right, you need to be aware of the hype train, and again, you need to avoid buying into somebody just because they have a good game or two. And one of the reasons why that's going to come up is in one of my later pitfalls you need to avoid. I think the shortened season, especially around basketball, people are gonna buy and overinvest in people, and you need to kind of stay the course. And what I mean by that is, let's say you've got Zion cards, or let's say you've got Ja cards. Don't get too up or down if those prices fluctuate. Let's say Zion and the Pelicans lose a game, right? Okay, whoop-de-doo. That doesn't mean that Zion's a bad player, that his cards are worthless, you need to sell off your position, all that sort of stuff, right? Don't do that. Be aware of this shortened season and this hype that's going to overinflate some cards as well. And when somebody has a dip, it's going to seem like they've really dipped far below the market value, when in reality, we know that they will return to kind of a steady state. The second piece I want you to keep in mind is to be very, very, very leery of prospecting. And what I mean by that is now is not the time to go overindulge in, I see a lot of people buying Michael Porter Jr. I've got some MPJ cards too. But if you're trying to buy and sell in this very shortened window, I think that's a bad idea. You need to be an MPJ holder for 6 months, a year, 18 months. You need to see him produce on the court, because maybe he does come out and have a few games that are really good and the Nugs go on a playoff run. Hey, that's going to shoot up his prices a ton. But maybe you're not going to be positioned well enough to get out of that, or you need to actually say, you know what, I'm going to stick with him for the longer term. And I think ultimately where this comes into play a little bit more is actually in baseball, right? Because prospecting in baseball is such a known strategy. So one of the guys that ultimately was just in last year's draft, his first Bowman Chrome cards, or Bowman cards rather, are out just as of a month ago, and that's the second overall pick, Bobby Witt Jr. He's one of those guys that I'm super high on, right? Being a Royals guy, being a Kansas City fan, Bobby Witt Jr. has a ton of talent. And one of the things that I think can help you in this time, and certainly something you need to keep in mind, is he actually got a Major League Spring Training invite. And in this shortened season in baseball, even though it's going to be 60 games, they're going to have this taxi squad, so to speak, where guys can be in the city and kind of come up and down a little bit more fluidly than if they were assigned to a minor league team and had options and all these other sort of restrictions that would prevent them from ascending to the major leagues in that same year. Bobby Witt Jr. is one of those guys that I think could shoot the moon and make it all the way to the majors. And if he does, his prices are going to be through the roof. So that's something I think you need to keep in mind. And maybe now is a good time to buy some Bobby Witt Jr. cards. Another guy, this is one that is well known, is one of the top picks in the draft, Tyler Soderstrom. He's a catcher and certainly is another one of those guys who got a big league spring training or second spring training, re-spring training, whatever you want to call it. He got an invite to come up and do that, I believe, with A's. And so he's one of those guys that, again, could just all the way shoot through the moon and make it all the way to the big leagues. Well, he doesn't have a ton of cards. So imagine if he comes out in Bowman's Best, say, later on this year, or Bowman Draft. Those cards are going to be hotter than hot, white hot. So something to keep in mind, right, as we sort of look to and prospect a little bit. Those are some good ones, but certainly I think there are a lot more downside, particularly in basketball. One of the guys, right, that you have to look at who is going to be on a playoff team. And so those are going to be guys like Brandon Clark, Bull, although I believe he's injured right now, Goga, right? Like none of those guys are really going to be ones you're going to have a lot of long-term position in. But one of the guys who is sort of under the radar that a lot of people have been talking about is SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And he's one of those guys for OKC who could make some noise. He's certainly kind of ascended to a mid-range star, a budding star, and his cards that typically go for, about $30 for this base prism could see a jump. But again, I don't know that I bet the farm on him. And so that's something you got to keep in mind when prospecting in basketball. Now's not the right time to do it. And here's why. My third and final pitfall that y'all need to keep in mind when looking and investing in sports cards during this return is this idea that nothing is absolute, and this idea that people are going to be day trading based on players. And so let's say, right, SGA has a good game and his prices soar. You need to already be selling, so to speak, an SGA card either on eBay or one of the other platforms in order to kind of time the market right. And while that sounds all well and good, there's one thing I think you need to keep in mind, and this is really critical. Nothing is guaranteed. With the way kind of our health and society and cases have been going, this pandemic could curtail the entire season tomorrow. It may mean that they get 5 games in and have to shut things down. It could be that they delay things further. Somebody tests positive. Your guy could test positive. So it sort of takes the injury concern that normally exists when investing in a player and amps it up. And let's also think about it not from an injury concern, just from a sheer number of games perspective. In both basketball and baseball, you're talking about 8 or 60 games in the regular season and then a playoff run, or potential playoff run, I guess. Well, let's say in that SGA example, they go through that 8 games and then they get bounced in the first round. You're going to probably think, oh, I'm going to bet on him going on a run. That may or may not happen. And so a lot of people have that old adage of invest in the offseason doesn't really apply during this time. And I think because sports cards have kind of seen that rise during this quarantine, it's going to make for a really volatile marketplace. People are going to be buying and selling like crazy. And so you have to know when to hold them, when to fold them, and when to sell, when to buy. And I think all those are really going to come into play. And I'm going to take a very cautious approach on selling during this time. Although I do think there's a lot of potential for you to make some money if your guy gets hot. And you just have to time things very, very, very smartly. And your strategy has to be very differentiated from others in the market. So a 7-day auction that may have been standard across the board, 2 months ago, I don't think is going to play right now. Because what happens if they have a game in 2 days and that player gets hurt, the season curtails, he goes and has a bad game? That price could really deflate your asking price. I think one of the things I've been thinking about is doing do a buy it now, but market a little bit above what I think the market might be, and do an OBO with it. Do an or best offer and see what you can get out of it. Because again, I think that's sort of the middle ground between rolling the dice on an auction and setting that market on a buy it now, where things are going to be so volatile that you may have to really adjust on the fly and really quickly. So those are some ideas, some projections on my part about some pitfalls that I think you all need to avoid. The hyper volatility of the market and of prices. Be wary of prospecting during this time when sports return. And third, nothing is a sure thing. So keep that in mind. Buy and sell very wisely. That's going to do it for today's video. Again, leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think about all this. Do you like it? Do you not? Would love to get into it with you. And until next time, keep your flip game strong.